Welcome back, friends, to the Artistic Vision podcast about theology and the arts. And this week we have a very special guest, a hometown hero, one of my colleagues at Montreat College, Don King, who is a leading scholar on C.S. Lewis and his poetry specifically. He's taught at Montreat. This is his 51st year.
That's crazy.
Teaching at Montreat College. And he
That's
doesn't
amazing.
look 100. I don't know how old he has to be to teach for 50 years.
I mean, he's amazing.
He's really winsome, really compelling, and we're really excited about it. But Gary, why C.S. Lewis? Why are we having a C.S. Lewis scholar on?
Well, I mean, just having Don King on is amazing. I mean, I could just sort of sit at his feet and listen to him for hours on end, just nugget after nugget. But the idea of sight is a theme that runs throughout C.S. Lewis. We're Anglicans. He was Anglican, so he has a sacramental background. So the idea of seeing something and understanding that there's meaning that's deeper beyond what's being the things that we see, the material. And so, he talks about sight and the allegory of love, the great divorce with the artist, amazing. And so C.S. Lewis, I mean, it just is like, it just hit after hit. They just keep coming. And so I'm really excited. I think that this is encouraging, but also very practical for artists of all genres.
That's great. Well, here he is, the legend Don King. Enjoy. All right, here we are with Dr. Don King of Montreat College fame. It's good to have you with us.
Be here.
Good. Well, the first question we ask our guests as they come on is, what's your background in beauty, or what's your beginnings of beauty? Some people are raised with kind of an aesthetic bent or come from an artistic family. Some don't. And so kind of what's your gateway into, in your case, literature and beauty?
Probably from all of the reading I did as a young person. My parents, neither of which graduated from high school, and have had much interest in that kind of thing. They were good at encouraging me and my two sisters to go as far as we could with education. Anyway, I became a pretty avid reader early on, especially reading biographies. Winston Churchill, Robert E. Lee, Abraham Lincoln, or the standard biographies, I guess. I think maybe during that process, developed a real appreciation for books. I found a kind of beauty in books in general. And I'm not the kind of person that likes to smell books and turn a page or, crinkle a page. I don't mean in that sense, but just the whole creative process in the making of a book. It's not just the author, it's the publisher and copyright people and editors and all that kind of stuff. They all work together in the end to produce. I think a book can be seen as a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and part of your background too, isn't it? Like you started as an engineering major, which seems not artistic. So tell us about kind of that change from, what made you want to be kind of a STEM engineer to an English professor?
Growing up in high school, I liked math, so I took a lot of math courses. And at that time, it seemed like if you were interested in math, you should go into engineering. So I did. I was at Virginia Tech my first quarter, took calculus and several other courses. But the main roadblock for me was a course called Engineering Graphics, where you had to give you a set of lines and they say, okay, draw these lines from 3 different perspectives. All I could see was a flat piece of paper. I could not figure out to think three-dimensionally. I mean, today I don't even think they have that kind of exercise. They just give you a computer and say, go to it. But I just realized that wasn't going to work for me. And then I also realized I'd never want to drive over a bridge that I designed. So that helped move away from engineering. But I've been taking lit courses all along to help my GPA. And The other thing that sort of drove me at that time was thinking back to my high school days when I discovered Edgar Allan Poe and Arthur Conan Doyle, the Sherlock Holmes stories. So I just thought, well, I mean, I like literature. I do well at it. So why don't I major in it? That was about the same time I underwent a conversion experience. So Sand was early in all of that.
And you are I don't want to put claims on you, but you seem to be the C.S. Lewis poetry guy. And so what led you to C.S. Lewis particularly, and then to his poetry, which is probably for a lot of people who even like C.S. Lewis, maybe his most not as well known kind of. Yeah.
First became interested in Lewis as a poet probably in the mid '80s. I was teaching at Montreat at the time. I thought I had read everything that Lewis had written. Then I came across his first two published works, which were volumes of poetry. It's in Bondage, published in 1919, and Timer in 1926. It was telling to me that his first two published works were not prose; they were volumes of poetry. I continue to find other poems that Lewis had written. There were a couple of volumes that Walter Hooper had put together in 1964 and 1969. I thought this is pretty intriguing. Again, I thought I'd read everything, but I hadn't read Lewis's poetry. So I read it in earnest, became pretty fascinated with this incredible desire as a young man he had to become a great poet. Up until his late 20s, Lewis yearned to achieve acclaim as a great poet. I tried to find out what kind of scholarship there was available on Lewis as a poet, but almost nothing had been published on him as a poet. So from the mid 80s to the late 90s, I was on a path of trying to find and read and study all of Lewis's poetry. So eventually in 2001, I published C.S. Lewis' Poet, The Legacy of His Poetic Impulse. So that's kind of what led me into being interested in Lewis's poetry. I sort of make two contentions in that book. First is, although we wouldn't treat Lewis as a great poet in the same category as Yeats or an Eliot or a Heaney, he's still a very good poet. I think people sometimes too quickly dismiss Lewis as a poet, and I think that's a huge mistake. The reason I think that is because of my second contention, and that is that I think Lewis's best poetry appears in his prose. That is what we might call poetic prose, been defined as ordinary spoken and written language, makes use of cadence and rhythm, figurative language, so forth. All of those things, I think, have made a long-lasting impact in his prose, and it goes back to that early desire to be a great poet. You can think of a couple of prose passages I'll point out, especially from Paralandra, chapters 3 and 4 and 17, just really rich with poetic prose. And then I think lots of passages in the Narnia series, and even A Grief Observed. I've argued that A Grief Observed is a great example of free verse. So that's probably more than you wanted to know, but there you go.
No, that's great. Yeah, I think too, I mean, yeah, you can see maybe like the efforts of Lewis in something that maybe didn't work out for him technically, right? He's not known as a great poet, but how that transfers into his other writings, and so just by like that artistic or aesthetic pursuit, it actually makes him the great writer that he is.
Yeah, I think that Lewis had to die the idea of being a great poet. And I think God's hand was definitely involved in that, because when Lewis, this was the late 20s, when Lewis dies to the idea of being a great poet, he's also moving towards faith in Christ. And I think that probably, I wouldn't say it's an exaggeration, but I think that God killed Lewis's desire to be a great poet. When he did that, he also released in Lewis an imaginative fountainhead that no one, including Lewis, could have imagined at the time. So I think that's a really interesting part of Lewis's story.
Yeah. Alex and I have been working on projects that have tended to be related to the idea of sight and seeing anew, and I wanted to ask a couple of questions based on vision and the weight of glory specifically. It seems like Lewis confronts rationalism to a degree where the thing that is real is not just limited to things that can be explained, not just. But then again, on the fantasy side, he does a good job of balancing that, and I've always been drawn to this quote that you see in The Weight of Glory, where he says, "The books or the music in which we thought the beauty was located will betray us if we trust them. It was not in them; it only came through them. And what came through them was longing. These things, the beauty, the memory of our own past, are good images of what we really desire. But if they are mistaken for the thing itself, they turn into dumb idols, breaking the hearts of their worshippers. For they are not the thing itself, they are only the scent of a flower we have not found, the echo of a tune we have not heard, news from a country we have never yet visited." I love the idea of beauty as it can capture our attention, it can capture our gaze to the point where we can worship the thing, but he points us through the thing. These images of beauty are symbols of something more significant. I think he even talked about his conversion experiences, uh, this new vision coming alive, like the world was almost charged for him. But I think of his own past, and maybe his most known works with the Chronicles of Narnia were like a romanticizing or a memory of his past, where he reimagines it as something more than he knew even at the time. Would you say that's accurate, or how does that reflect his understanding of the way beauty works?
I think that's a good way to describe it. It's sort of relying on our memory being exactly the catalyst, but our memory is the place where many of us go to when we think about beautiful experiences that we've had. Was said in Surprised by Joy that growing up, when he thinks back to it, the house that he grew up in, he said there was almost no beauty there. There were no beautiful pictures on the wall, anything like that. His own first experience with beauty would probably connect it with the idea of joy. And you probably know this story from Surprised by Joy. Lewis writes, "In those very early days, my brother brought into the nursery the lid of a biscuit tin. He had covered with moss and garnished with twigs and flowers so as to make it a toy garden, a toy forest. That was the first beauty I ever knew. The real garden had failed to do, the toy garden did. Made me aware of nature, not indeed as a storehouse of forms and colors, but as something cool, truly fresh, and exuberant. Do not think the impression was very important at the moment. It soon became important in memory. As long as I live, my imagination of paradise will retain something of my brother's toy garden." He connects that also to the idea of joy. So, yeah, really important. Now, I think Lewis was also influenced by reading Wordsworth. Wordsworth is probably the great poet, relying on memory, how important it is for us to go back to our memory. And Wordsworth almost argues that the initial experience we have, it's just the raw material. We see a beautiful waterfall, that's just the raw material for when later on we go back in our memory and we relive that experience. And from that, we can draw so much.
That's great.
Let me ask y'all a question. Do you have in your own memories places that you go back to that you kind of draw on from when you're in a place that's not quite so pleasing or happy or an experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all romanticize in ways, and I think for me, romanticizing had it has aspects of making things better than they were, and sometimes even making things worse than they were. Last summer, we went to Michigan. I grew up in Michigan through fourth grade. And I remember going back to the neighborhood that I grew up in the woods that I used to make forts in and stuff like that. And thinking about the various aspects of my childhood growing up and going back and seeing the actual places, um, almost, um, yeah, it made me rethink the memories that I had. Um, but I was very much shaped by those memories for better or for worse. Um, and it's amazing how those memories form us.
Alex, how about you?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I always think I have a bad memory. Um, and so like a lot of my childhood I don't remember, and I think there's kind of some reasons for that, but um in kind of God's protections of some things. But I think maybe if Lewis thinks about his like beauty as in joy, I think I can go back to like the beauty of relationality. Like there's like being with old friends and or even like driving home from, Asheville to Cleveland, Ohio, where I'm from, like just the the relational memories that I have at different exits as I pass through Akron and Cuyahoga Falls and Hudson and Macedonia and Mayfield up to Willoughby, like there's like at each exit I can like relationally think about like this joy. And I think too, like memory wise, there's something like just like my kids, like if like in those low places, I think like those memories of even this morning, my daughter saying, in a little relational tiff with my wife, she kind of came up and said, what did we talk about last night? Calm, right? Right, calm on your head. And I was like, and there's like those moments that like, oh man, these kids are such a gift in those kind of hard times.
I think maybe, the first book that Lewis wrote after his conversion, Pilgrim's Regress, I think he draws a lot on his memories in that book. My own favorite memory has to do with Ireland. In the 1950s, my father and one of my uncles, a man who used to work in the engine room, the ferries that went back and forth between Norfolk, Virginia, and the eastern shore of Virginia. They became friends. They became duck hunters, and they got rights. They got squatters' rights to an island in the Chesapeake Bay for 99 years. They paid $1 for it.
Wow.
So they built a structure on this island. We called it the Club, but believe me, it wasn't Club Med. It was pretty primitive stuff. I'll shorten the story. Would go out there for 2 or 3 weeks during the summer, and there was only one way to get there. You had to bring everything with you: water, ice, food, and so forth. But I had some of the most fantastic experiences, and I definitely go back to them in my memory. My favorite ones is in 1976 on the bicentennial of our country. All of us went out clamming off the back of this island, and we said, okay, we're not going to stop until we get 200 clams. We spent about 3 hours clamming that whole day, and that kind of memory just sticks with me, and it comes back. If I ever write a novel, it'll be based on the experiences that I had in that island, because I had plenty of them. But anyway, sorry.
That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
That's
I
great.
hope you write that.
Definitely. Um, so here's another, we don't usually do this, but I think with like scholars and somebody with a subject matter expertise, we just kind of want to read some passages and let you kind of comment on them and kind of teach it to us. So this one's from The Great Divorce, and right, this kind of fictional afterlife that Lewis is portraying. And we come to this guy who'd been a famous artist, and he says to the ghost, the angel, "Look here, isn't one going to be allowed to go on painting in the new heavens and new earth?" And then the angel says, "Looking comes first. But I've had my look. I've seen just what I want to do. God, I wish I'd thought of bringing my things with me." The spirit shook his head, scattering light from his hair as he did so. That sort of thing's no good here, he said. What do you mean? Said the ghost. When you painted on earth, at least in your earlier days, it was because you caught glimpses of heaven in the earthly landscape. The success of your painting was that it enabled others to see the glimpses too. But here you are having the thing itself. It is from here that the messages came. There is no good telling us about this country, for we see it already. In fact, we see it better than you do. Then there's never going to be any point in painting here? I don't say that. Well, you've grown into a person. It's all right. We all had to do it. There'll be some things which you'll see better than anyone else. One of the things you'll want to do will be to tell us about them, but not yet. At present, your business is to see. Come and see. He is endless. Come and feed. There's a little pause. That will be delightful, said the ghost, presently in a rather dull voice. Come then, said the spirit, offering it his arm. How soon do you think I could be painting? It asked. The spirit broke into laughter. Don't you see you'll never paint at all if that's what you're thinking about? He said. What do you mean? Said the ghost. Why, if you are interested in the country only for the sake of painting it, you'll never learn to see the country. But that's just how a real artist is interested in the country. No, you're forgetting, said the spirit. That was not how you began. Light itself was your first love. You loved paint only as a means of telling about light.
So good.
That's great stuff. It kind of reminds me of some of the passages that Lewis includes in his essay "Christianity and Literature." I don't know if y'all have read that essay.
Mm-hmm.
But there, Lewis spends some time talking about how artists who are worried about being original, they're missing the point, because Lewis's argument is you're not original as an artist. What you're doing is reflecting divine truth or divine beauty. He writes, particularly applying that idea to literature, he says, in its greatest generality, we should get at the basis of all critical theory the maxim that an author should never conceive himself as bringing into existence beauty or wisdom which did not exist before, but simply and solely is trying to embody in terms of his own art some reflection of eternal beauty and wisdom. A passage that's always stayed with me. I don't think Lewis is demeaning the idea of wanting to be original. I think every artist has a sense in which I want to be original in some way. But if that's the end, which is kind of what we have in The Great Divorce, that this character, if that's the end for which you're writing or painting or drawing or whatever, you're missing the point. Where we reflect the beauty of God, we reflect wisdom of God and so forth, as Christian artists anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love too how it's so maybe outside of your control whether you're good or famous or known painter. Right? I can just imagine the ghost. You're like, I want to get back to work so I can show people this, and the spirit saying, just look, right, just see, and we want to produce out of our vision. We want to produce out of what we're seeing, and we want those things to be congruent. But the point is never just be a painter or a writer.
In my own experience, in the writing that I've done, every single time when I've tried to push forward with a writing progress, when there was some kind of sort of huge thing stopping me, but I want to just keep pressing forward with it. Every time I've stopped, the result has been 20 times better had I just kind of bullheaded along. I think the waiting and the receiving, while it's not very efficient, it usually makes whatever we're working on that much better.
Yeah. One of the simplest instruction that I got from an art instructor in college was, when you think that you've messed it up, you want to throw it in the garbage can, don't do it. There's always a difficult part of every composition that if you're patient with it and you work through it, then it usually works itself out. And I probably have more things in the garbage can than otherwise. But if I would have been able to work through it, who knows what they could have turned into. That's such good references too. Hopefully in the show notes we can keep some of the essays that you're referring to point folks to. In the allegory of love, Lewis begins to talk a little bit about symbolism and sacramentalism, which obviously is a word that strikes a chord with us. He writes about the material world being a copy of the invisible. He says, this is allegory, and it is with this alone that we have to deal. But there is another way of using the equivalence, which is almost the opposite of allegory, and which I would call sacramentalism or symbolism. If our passions, being immaterial, can be copied by material inventions, then it is possible that our material world, in its turn, is the copy of an invisible world. And then he goes on to say the attempt to read that something else through its sensible imitations, to see the archetype in the copy, is what I mean by symbolism or sacramentalism. He continues, the symbolist leaves the given to find that which is more real. To put the difference in another way, for the symbolist, it is we who are the allegory. So that jumps on a lot of the themes that we've already talked about, but I'd love to hear if you have any further comments on that.
Well, and I'm going to defer a little bit to Alex here, but it seems to me that Lewis's Plato underwear is showing a little bit there. This is definitely a Platonist when it comes to where we find reality, so forth. And I think the passage you read it's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, the idea of seeing the thing, the symbol itself, the material world, as a indication of something that's even more real yet unseen, I think is really beautiful. And if we as artists can develop that way of seeing, it seems like it, whether we're poets or painters, that it can only help us be able to look at the world and see it differently, and be able to get at what you were saying as Christians, to say something of God, especially since he's the maker ultimately.
I hate to refer to Pilgrim's Regress again, but Lewis has a couple of chapters in there when he talks about the copy versus the original. So some of your listeners or viewers might want to take a look at Pilgrim's Regress.
Good. I am going back to look at it myself. Sure.
That's great. So on maybe even on allegory, I mean, I think friendships, right? This is the Inklings are, one of the best known friend groups. And so it kind of goes against the stereotype of the artist as kind of an individual genius or kind of a lone, renegade. And really this group comes together, right? Tolkien, Lewis, and others, and coming to help each other both nurture and challenge their creative craft and calling. Talk about kind of the friendships, both nurturing and challenging this group of friends at this time.
It's generally agreed by Lewis and Inkling scholars that Lewis and his brother Warney and Tolkien were the nucleus of what we now call the Inklings. The three of them began by meeting in the afternoon, and they would read something, they would talk about it. Eventually, they'd probably go and have a meal together. Then over time, as other people joined them, I think the general pattern in an Inklings meeting was they liked to hear written compositions read aloud. So you were supposed to bring a written composition and be ready to read it aloud, to be ready to be critiqued. I don't think these weren't soft critiques. They would tell you what they thought. If they thought it was bad, they would tell you that it was bad. Like when Warren read his first essay to the Inklings, this would have been in the late 30s. He was really afraid of how it would be received. Mm-hmm. He was surprised when it was received quite well. That's how, you could almost say it was iron sharpening iron. Mm-hmm. One commonality was he loved literature and reading they were writing aloud, and they were all Christians. So they had those two things in common.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. You have the opportunity as a professor to speak to future writers all the time. As a last word, we ask all of our guests to just give a note to artists in general, whether they be poets or novelists or painters or sculptors. I was wondering if you would be willing to offer a word to artists who are listening to this podcast.
I can only speak from the perspective of a writer, because I'm not a visual artist, or Lord knows, not a musician. I think my advice would be to find out what it is you love, what you're drawn to, and invest every moment when you can, when you're not dealing with raising a family or paying bills or whatever. Throw yourself into that pursuit. Be willing to go wherever it leads you. It may take you some places that will end up surprising you. It will take a certain amount of perseverance, hanging in there, realizing that there's going to be some drought periods. If it's something that you feel driven, and particularly if you feel driven by the Holy Spirit, stick with it. Just stick with it. Keep going at it, and see what happens. So I don't really have anything very profound other than stick-to-itiveness. One of my friends who owned a business said about his employees, 80% of it's just showing up.
Right.
I tell that to students sometimes, Alex. I tell that to students sometimes.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Yeah, I can guarantee you that there are people listening to this who need to hear exactly what you just said, and that's just keep going.
I always feel like I usually teach students, I think, that are probably much smarter than me. But I enjoy that. I said that one time, Alex, to one of our colleagues. I can't remember who it was now. I said, I'm teaching students who are much smarter than me. She said, yeah, but you know more.
That's good. Yeah.
It was helpful.
Yeah.
That's really
What's
good.
What's a word?
I wish you guys all the best with your book.
What
a great idea. Yeah, what a great idea. Is it published yet?
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's out in the world. Yeah,
I got the link.
I'll drop one off to you when I get a chance.
What a great topic.
Yeah. And Lewis, he's quoted throughout in kind of Anglican fashion. We're fans of him. But yeah, I think this stuff I think is so pertinent to help artists think through vision, right? And seeing the world a certain way, creating out of that vision, and pointing to the creator as we create. Really helpful. Thanks for all your wisdom and guidance.
Yeah.
Really, really appreciate your thoughts here.
Well, I think it's amazing how profoundly God has used Lewis the 20th century and now even into the 21st century.
Yeah.
Sometimes I ask if I think there'll ever be another writer like Lewis. Certainly in God's bounty there might be, but probably will be a while.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's remarkable.
It's really different genres. Anyway. Thanks for having.
Yeah, thank you.
Coming on.
All the best.
Appreciate it.